This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, Episode 3. I'm your host, Steve, at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys Network from idpguys.org. So hello once again, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So in today's episode, I'm going to give you my quarterback and tight end rankings for rookies for your upcoming Dynasty rookie drafts. The NFL draft has now been concluded for a couple of days. We've had some time to chew on the landing spots and the players, and we are now ready to dive into our ever important rookie drafts. So just going to start with the quarterbacks, then go with the tight ends. Then next episode, we'll take a look at the running backs and the wide receivers, just to help you be as prepared as possible for those drafts. All right, so let's pull up the QBs here. So there's going to be a theme here with these QBs. Patience will definitely be required for many of these, okay? But at the top of my rankings, I am going to have Kenny Pickett, who was the top quarterback drafted in the 2022 NFL draft by the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is just a phenomenal landing spot. Tons of talent in that organization right now. You got tight end Pat Freiermuth, wide receivers Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool. Then the Steelers added on George Pickens and Calvin Austin, and of course Najee Harris as the running back. Now, I say to be patient with Pickett because he will likely not be the starter to start the season. That will most likely be husband material Mitch Trubisky, although I think Kenny Pickett can absolutely keep Trubisky looking over his shoulder. I think it's really only a matter of time until Pickett becomes the starter as well as a long-term starter. Pittsburgh has had a history of having really good stability at positions like that. Obviously, they are now in transition with Ben Roethlisberger off the team. So for me, Pickett seems to be a very safe pick, and I would select him basically anywhere in the first round of your rookie dynasty drafts. Probably not 101. We'll get to who will be 101 in next episode, but it really would not. I wouldn't think it's crazy if he went as early as 102 as a second pick overall in the draft. And then just the later on you go in that first round, just the value will just get better for you. So for me, definitely a first round target, especially if you are QB needy in Superflex leagues. Then in tier 2, it's a pretty close call for me, to be honest. I did give the slight edge to Atlanta Falcons, Desmond Ritter. I would think it would be wise to take him in the late first or as late as the mid-second. I do not think he's going to last any longer than the mid-second in those rookie drafts. He had pretty substantial draft capital, being the second quarterback selected pretty early in the third round, the 10th overall pick in the third round. So the Falcons did say goodbye to Matt Ryan. They bring in Marcus Mariota, who is an intriguing prospect in a offense that is ascending. So the head coach, Arthur Smith, you got Kyle Pitts, you have Drake London, who the Falcons also drafted in this class. We'll get to him in the next episode. So Desmond Ritter is a little bit similar to Marcus Mariota in a lot of ways because they have the unique athletic ability where they're able to use their rushing, and we love that, especially for fantasy football. So again, Desmond Ritter, late first round. No, he's not going to last longer than the mid-second. If that happens, absolute smash there. So I like Ritter, especially in Atlanta. And then in Tennessee, quarterback Malik Willis, I think he can be selected in the same range. So the Tennessee Titans offense still runs through Derrick Henry, but it's the same sort of deal. Like Ritter, like Pickett, Willis, I don't believe will be the starter in week 1 or even in his rookie season. It is still firmly Ryan Tannehill's job, and I don't think Willis is going to change that. Not as a rookie, especially. He will have to be so impressive, and Tannehill would have to really drop off for them to make that switch. God forbid Tannehill gets injured. That's maybe is how Willis gets rookie season action. Now, he is a very dynamic player. You cannot deny that. You can question his level of competition, where he really blew up at Liberty University. But the fact remains that the Titans thought it was worth it to grab him in the 3rd round. And I think that's a really great value for them as a franchise. As Tannehill, I wouldn't call him old, but he is getting older. So just a nice contingency plan either way. And we like that for dynasty purposes. Willis is a guy I'm definitely targeting, but not going to reach for based on the landing spot, but more importantly, the draft capital. Say he went to Carolina in the 1st round at like pick 6 overall. This would be a different story. He would likely be above Kenny Pickett, but that really does matter in this case. And on top of the fact that it's a rush first offense, not super thrilled about that, but he is going to be paired up with Treylon Burks for the length of his career, most likely, as the Titans sent A.J. Brown away to the Eagles. So a lot to like with Willis, but patience will definitely be required. Then my tier 3, another pretty close call between Matt Corral and Sam Howell, both to be looking around 3rd round value. Although Corral, I think it is plausible that he could go in the late 2nd or no later than the mid 3rd. Just for me personally, he presents a lot of unique athleticism with a lot of interesting weapons there in Carolina, with wide receiver DJ Moore, obviously running back Christian McCaffrey, and then you have some other players who we hope can live up to their potential, with especially with Terrace Marshall, Tommy Tremble. So some interesting players there, and should still be pretty on the, I'll just say it pleasantly, on the low end of the NFC. I don't see them winning a ton of games. They will arguably be the 2nd worst team just in their division alone. So they could be in position to add on another big-time playmaker in next year's draft or beyond. So like Corral's athletic upside, but another one who will likely be starting the season as the backup. Corral did suffer a late season ankle injury that took place in the bowl game. Unfortunately, you hate to see that sort of thing for the guy's career, but that just gives enough runway, I believe, for Sam Darnold to at least start the season as the starter. So it's just a matter of time when Darnold starts to make the typical mistakes that he does. But Corral, I think, is a very interesting option that I would not hesitate to take in the late 2nd or mid 3rd. Sam Howell incredibly was drafted by the Washington Commanders at the top of the 5th round. Really ridiculous value. That there was a debate saying that Howell could have very well been the best quarterback in this class. He did just have a little bit of a dip in production during his final season at UNC. I would say in large part because of the talent that left in the previous draft. So what left the team was Javonte Williams, the running back Michael Carter, and then wide receivers, both who were drafted in the previous season, Daz Newsome and Diami Brown. So losing that kind of talent, it does matter. And then that, it may have presented this little bit of a dip to buy here for Washington, but long term, a good spot. Washington has some pretty interesting pieces in the offense. Terry McLaurin, they obviously drafted Jahan Dotson out of Penn State pretty high, so we'll talk about him in the next episode. 3rd round is where I would target Sam Howell. The quarterback that's in front of him, of course, is Carson Wentz, who, despite having very early career success, has struggled in the last couple of seasons, not only to stay healthy, but also play consistently well, especially for fantasy purposes, very up and down. So we do like Sam Howell to lead the Commanders in the future. 3rd round, if you need a quarterback and you missed out on the first 4, I will absolutely not hesitate to take him anywhere in the 3rd round. Could be early, could be late. Again, later the better. Then tier 4, the New England Patriots selected Bailey Zapp out of Western Kentucky, a very athletic quarterback prospect. I'm considering him borderline draftable in the deepest of Superflex leagues only because they have their franchise quarterback in Mac Jones, who they drafted last year. Although this pick still made me raise an eyebrow in the actual NFL draft. He was drafted ahead of Sam Howell. So that is just very interesting to me. I think, again, in the deepest of superflex leagues, is that a spot for him to go, or just maybe like a priority free agent, like after the draft, just if you have if you have to put in a fab bid. Fab, of course, is free agent acquisition budget. Just like a $0 bid, throw him in the taxi if there's room for him. Really, if you miss out on him, no big deal. But just a name to kind of keep an eye on. I just find it very fascinating that he was drafted ahead of Sam Howell. And the Patriots do know what they're doing. But again, Mac Jones is the franchise quarterback. Behind him is Brian Hoyer, who can be decent in his own right. Not really for fantasy purposes, but just to run an offense. So we're talking major shot in the dark here with this guy. But if you play in an insanely deep league, not a bad name to know. But beyond them, really not looking to draft or even add any of the quarterbacks from this class. So we'll take a look at the tight ends now. All right. So we have a 5-tier system here for the tight ends. These are basically the guys that I'm interested in drafting or even targeting. There are some interesting names that just kind of landed in some not so great landing spots. So we'll touch on those in a bit after we go through these guys. So top of the tier, this is really easy for me. This is Trey Mcbride, who was drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. They actually traded up to take him pretty decently late in the second round of the NFL draft. He got selected at 23rd in the second round. Top tight end off the board. He was the Mackey Award winner, and basically patience is going to be needed with him because he will be playing behind he'll be playing behind Zach Ertz as he was traded to the Arizona Cardinals from the Philadelphia Eagles. He was traded there to fill in the gap that was missing from Max Williams, who unfortunately had a season-ending injury. So Trey Mcbride will just have to be on the taxi for at least a year. But I think in tight end premium, I think it'll be worth it. It's an awesome offense. They have a really dynamic quarterback in Kyler Murray. That there's a lot of good things happening in Arizona. The head coach was extended. The GM was extended. It's just a lot of stability, a lot of good weapons there. So with the tight end position being so scarce, I think he could be a premium ad, but definitely worth it if your roster can take on the little bit of a risk, perhaps, of being patient at that position. Then tier 2, pretty close call here for me between Jelani Woods and Greg Dolcich. Dolcich, of course, lands in Denver with the revamped offense now being led by Russell Wilson. A lot of mouths to feed there. You got Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Javonte Williams, the running back, more wide receivers, and Tim Patrick and the young KJ Hamler. If he can stay on the field, that would be awesome. And then you have Albert O, who is the presumed starter after dynamic tight end Noah Fant was sent over to Seattle as part of the Russell Wilson trade. So Dolcich, who's a really good pass-catching tight end, I believe you should be targeting him in the mid-3rd round to the early 4th round. I don't think he will last beyond that point. So if you want him, you got to get him in that range. And again, this is more just for tight end premium, where you get extra points per catch from the tight end position because of the scarcity. It's just a good way to level the playing field there. Now, Jelani Woods was drafted as the second tight end off the board. They actually were only, Jelani Woods and Greg Dolcich were only 7 picks apart in the NFL draft. So both of them were taken in the 3rd round, but Jelani Woods was the second tight end off the board, being selected by the Indianapolis Colts, which is now being led by new quarterback Matt Ryan. Fun fact, I think this is the 5th season in a row that the Colts will have a new starting quarterback. So this year, it's looking like it's going to be Matt Ryan. Last year, it was Carson Wentz. Year before that was Phillip Rivers. Year before that was Jacoby Brissett. And the year before that was Andrew Luck. So a very fascinating situation there in Indianapolis. But Jelani Woods, awesome athlete, absolute freak of nature as far as an athlete goes. There's a little bit of tight end competition there. They did draft Kylan Granson, who was a pretty hot rookie sleeper pick in rookie drafts last year. So we'll see how that plays out. They still have Michael Pittman, and they did spend high draft capital on Alec Pierce, another wide receiver who we'll talk about in the next episode. But of course, in Indianapolis, it is still the Jonathan Taylor show, the unbelievably studly running back. So it goes through him. But Jelani Woods, again, we're looking at athleticism. We're looking at scarcity at the tight end position. That's the kind of guy you want to target, just tremendous upside at a scarce position. And the draft capital is something you can lean on to make that decision, because he just checks all the boxes. And the draft capital for me was like the real lingering one. It's like, is a team really gonna prioritize getting him on the roster? And the Colts did. So extremely encouraging stuff there. Love Jelani Woods. Tier 3 is New York Jets, Jeremy Ruckert. He was the Ohio State University product. He's my guy in the 4th round, pretty much in any format. This is when it gets to be very thin at running back, very thin at wide receiver. I still like Jeremy Ruckert a lot. Again, athletic, pass-catching tight end in an ascending offense. So the New York Jets, it was not a pretty picture last season. Rookie Zach Wilson really did struggle in his rookie season, but they have very nice playmakers sort of on deck here. So Elijah Moore, who's a rookie last year, awesome dynamic player. He's part of that offense. Then you have Michael Carter, who was like the pass catching back of the previous season. The Jets bring in Breece Hall. We'll talk about him in the next episode. The Jets also bring in Garrett Wilson, another great player. They brought in multiple tight ends in free agency, although none really are going to worry me as far as Ruckert's long-term outlook is concerned. The Jets brought in CJ Uzama from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a little bit of an older tight end, and even when he did have decent opportunity, very inconsistent from a fantasy standpoint. Tight end can be just very brutal as far as finding superstars. So really, he's like a veteran presence, but just honestly, just like nothing special. They also brought in Tyler Conklin from the Minnesota Vikings. Just your quintessential, just a guy type of a player. He was productive last season, but was extremely volume dependent, and that's just not going to be the case unless for some bizarre reason he's the only healthy tight end in the Jets offense. And even then, be a pretty deep type of a player to target. So Ruckert, I really like him long-term. And this to me is just targeting an offense where it's like the rising tide lifts all boats kind of a situation. I think I use that phrase right in this case, where you add all these pieces and it can only go up. So that's where I'm banking on for Jeremy Ruckert. And again, really good draft capital here with him. He was also selected in the 3rd round as the 4th overall tight end drafted in the NFL draft. 4th tier, we're looking at Tampa Bay tight end Kade Otten. I like him in the late 4th round, perhaps in the 5th round. Just a lot of moving parts there in Tampa Bay. A really great offense to try to get players from. Tom Brady is still the quarterback. Rob Gronkowski cannot commit to football right now. That was like the latest news story with his questions of if he wants to retire again and all this. So, and then the tight end behind Rob Gronkowski, OJ Howard, is now in Buffalo. So some pretty sneaky opportunity there for Otten. And Otten is an interesting one. He was drafted as the first player in the 4th round. So not terrible draft capital there. Really just a nice opportunity buy at this case. And at this price, don't have much to lose. Again, the running backs, the wide receivers are going to be real shaky. So again, in tight end premium, where you want to try to prioritize that position if you need it, really can't go wrong there. In the same tier, we have Tennessee Titan Okwonu. Again, late fourth to the fifth round, just kind of in the same way of Kade Otten. A lot of opportunity in the Tennessee Titans passing game. Again, we have the transition from Tannehill to Willis perhaps coming up. And outside of the quarterbacks, you have an A.J. Brown-less now offense. You got Treylon Burks. You have a couple of other wide receivers who are young guys. Austin Hooper is probably the next best, biggest name at the tight end position, but not necessarily a consistent performer in any sense. He was for a bit there in his early seasons in Atlanta. Then when he was on the Browns, very up and down, had a couple little flashy moments. So nothing really to worry you. And again, at this cost, you really don't have much to lose. You just kind of throw them on the taxi squad, see what happens with that situation. Okwonu, interestingly enough, has been compared to Jonnu Smith, the extremely talented athletic tight end. Again, a little up and down for fantasy, but that's just the way the tight end position goes. So you're getting a really athletic with tremendous physical traits here in Okwonu in a offense that we do like. It is a run-heavy offense, of course, with Derrick Henry leading the way, but there is kind of sneaky opportunity there for a tight end to emerge. So again, just throw them in the taxi squad and just see what happens. You really got nothing to lose at this point. Tier 5, just the last name that I'll mention as far as a draftable, considerable tight end, New York Giants, Daniel Bellinger. I like him as a mid to late fifth round option in your rookie drafts. Again, in these tight end premium leagues. Decent draft capital near the top of the fourth round. He got drafted 4-7 in the NFL draft, which is actually kind of interesting draft capital for the Giants. They have a couple tight ends on the roster at this point. They have the 30-year-old Jordan Akins, who's really just isn't anything special. And they have Ricky Seals-Jones, who at one point seemed like he would be a pretty interesting athlete in the NFL. Had moments, had some flashing moments with Washington last season. So he will be the presumed starter in the new revamped Giants offense. I say revamped because they now have a new head coach, Brian Daboll, who is the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills for the ascension of Josh Allen. So that's going to be a really fascinating offense to watch. They got some interesting pieces there as well. You still got Saquon Barkley, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Kenny Galladay. They drafted Wan'Dale Robinson this year. We'll talk about him tomorrow or in the next episode. And then Kadarius Toney. I am very fascinated to see what ends up happening with him. Just a player with unique athleticism, but just got to have a chance to put it all together. So we'll see what happens there. But the fact remains is that there is sneaky potential for tight end opportunity there. So you take the draft capital, you take the situation that could be ascending. That's what I'm trying to focus in on. And especially at this price, late in the fifth round of your tight end premium leagues, really not much to lose. I hate to keep repeating that, but it is true in this case. Really borderline draftable in the first place, but so you don't want to reach for this guy, but definitely a priority free agent if you wanted to go a different direction and like no one else took him, just spend just even a fab bib of $0 and just if there's room for him on the taxi, again, in tight end premium, I cannot emphasize this enough. It has to be tight end premium to even consider players like this. That would be a wise way to go. Some of the other players who I just want to touch on briefly, who were looking to be interesting players in the draft coming up, but just kind of had bizarre landing spots. Just want to highlight Charlie Kolar and Isaiah Likely. Both of them were drafted by the Baltimore Ravens when they already have phenomenal tight end star Mark Andrews. That was a bit bizarre to me. So not really sure what they were thinking there. But again, the Baltimore Ravens are one of the best drafting teams in the NFL right now. So I'm really in no position to question that. Cole Turner is another interesting tight end option drafted by Washington. Logan Thomas was their starter last year, had a pretty tough injury. He missed, I want to say, more than half of the games of the season last year. So there is opportunity at the tight end position. They do have a player, John Bates, who's decent, not a tremendous athlete or anything. So there's possibility with Cole Turner just to keep like on your radar, just see what happens, just add him like in the middle of the season. But another guy to just keep an eye on, but buried on the depth chart, unfortunately. So there you have it. Those are the quarterback and tight end tiers. I'll pull up the quarterbacks one more time just to take another look at that. If you're watching on YouTube, that is, and then the tight ends once again. So that's episode 3. I do appreciate you listening and do appreciate you watching. Just want to remind you that at IDP Guys, there's going to be content relating to Dynasty and redraft leagues all summer long. Obviously, at IDP Guys, they have an emphasis on the individual players type of format, but we really do cover everything, articles, videos. Please check us out. You will not be sorry. And if you already are a subscriber, well, you already have an edge on your league mates, I'm sure. So thanks for tuning in and keep climbing.